Today is Friday, June 11th, 2021, which means it's Derelict Friday. Hello, fiendlings, how the hell are you? I have a longish commute for the next few weeks, and it consists of about 1.5 hours in the car per weekday. At the urging of my good friend and DRS co-host Terry Mixon, I made the attempt to narrate an unwritten story. In other words, I'm telling the story as it's coming into my head, stumbling, stuttering, and all. Using an app called otter.ai, it works on the web as well as on the phone, I record my words and it transcribes them into text. Not perfect, especially since car noise is loud and I don't yet have a noise-canceling mic, but it does a good enough job to get most of what I said correct. Although sometimes, even after listening to the recording and looking at the transcription, there are some sentences that only make sense if you're drunk on really hard drugs or brain damaged. Ah yes, the joys of editing. However, the first day I tried it, I ended up recording 6,000 words. 6,000 fucking words! That's 2 large chapters, folks, and a little over an hour of actual talking. Since then, I've been recording myself every day of the drive. Although I had a light day yesterday, only 2,500 words recorded, I already have nearly 16,000 words of a very rough draft. Again, the editing is going to be somewhat of a nightmare, but you know what I've discovered? There's no writer's block. There are corrections, notes to self, and other esoterica, meaning that it's a nasty rough draft, but the plot and characters continue to roll. This is all still in its experimental stage for me, and I imagine it'll get better as time goes on, and if I get a noise-canceling mic. But I'm excited about this. Should I ever manage to get over the embarrassment of talking to myself in front of other people, this means I can walk the dog or even ride my bike while, quote-unquote, writing. Should I drive to Colorado to see my relatives, I might even be able to write the first draft of a novel in 2 sittings. So if you want to write but you can't type worth a damn or have other issues with keyboards, Otter.ai and other speech-to-text software might be the answer for you. With that little tidbit passed along, how about we get back to the story? Be safe, have a great week, and we'll talk again real soon. Here's episode 27 of Derelict, Trident. Chapter 44. It wasn't long before Blue's first support craft arrived. Talby blinked at it twice and asked no one, "What the void is that?" Whatever it was similar to his SV-52, but sleeker, and it actually had what looked like stubby wings. The dim light reflected off a freshly printed Atmos steel hull. "What is it?" he asked again. Black responded this time.
According to Blue, it is an SV null, a gravitic engine-enabled vehicle.
Talby raised a brow. "A what?"
The vehicle uses a gravitic drive for propulsion instead of a typical engine. It still has thrusters, of course, but the drive allows for greater range, increased mobility, and exceptional speed.
He nodded, but his face was a mask of confusion. "All that means what, exactly?" Black was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, she sounded wistful.
Have you ever flown in gravity, Lieutenant? Or watched terrestrial birds? They glide. They use air currents and their altitude to change direction in 3D space, and they flap their wings for propulsion.
"Yeah, so?"
The gravitic drive provides a similar experience, enabling the vehicle to move nearly like a terrestrial bird.
Talby watched the SV drop several meters and come to a complete stop in front of him. The SV had done it as though it had been dropped to a floor.
"Lieutenant!"
A voice said over the comms.
"Talby, it's Sarah."
He grinned. "Well, hello, Lieutenant. I like your new ride." He could practically hear the smile in her voice.
"So do I. Yours, on the other hand, looks a little worn. How bad off are you?"
Talby shrugged, although she couldn't see it. "I have suit life support, but the cabin is depressurized. Got significant thruster damage and... Wait, there was something else. Oh yeah, I'm out of ammo."
"Ouch."
After a far too dramatic sigh, she said,
"Well, I don't have time to print you another one, so I guess you'll just have to use one of ours."
He blinked. "One of yours?"
"It'll be here soon,"
she said.
"Is the hangar secure?"
As secure as it can be, I guess. He assumed it was, since neither Oakes nor Black had said anything about unwanted guests.
"Good. We're going to use the hangar to get organized. I have skiffs and more SVs on the way."
He grinned. "Almost sounds like a military operation."
"Staging ground,"
she said.
"Based on what we saw on our way in here, it's going to be a siege."
Talby didn't like the sound of that. Speaking of, where the void have you been? What happened? She laughed before answering.
We don't have enough time to go through all of it. Let's just say we went to Uranus to perform an S&R mission. We ended up fighting our way out of there.
She was quiet for a moment.
I don't know how you made it back here.
He nodded to himself. To be honest, I'm not sure either. 2 more craft appeared on his screens. Those yours?
Yep. You should get transponder updates momentarily.
Where's Blue?
She's coming. Getting my Marines on their skiffs at the moment. They're bringing in slats of supplies.
Skiffs. The word rattled around his head before making him sadly smile. Black Company used to have skiffs. Void, Black Company used to have half a complement of Marines. Dunn, the remainder of the crew, and a troop of civilians were headed to the medical bay.
We know,
she said.
Black gave us the lowdown, and you haven't heard from them since?
No, Talby said. We haven't heard anything. Sarah James was quiet for a moment, but new telemetry appeared on Talby's display. It was a model of Trident Station that focused on the medical bays and the personnel wheels.
As long as they stuck to the inside passages to make it to the bay and stayed the void away from the personnel wheels, they shouldn't have too much of a problem reaching it.
Except we have no idea what was waiting for them inside there.
Kinda goes without saying.
Another SV Null appeared, its surface less pristine than the Lieutenant James's, and it didn't move as smoothly either. Maybe LeBlanc didn't have enough qualified pilots on her crew. You lose anybody? Sarah didn't respond immediately. The pause felt awkward, and he suddenly wished he hadn't asked.
Yes,
she said.
We lost one SV getting here.
Blue Company had 4 pilots, 1 for the ship and 3 for SV-52s. Black Company had only had Talby, Gunny, Oakes, and Dunn as qualified support vehicle operators. 2 of those, Oakes and Dunn, were emergency support at best. The names and faces of Blue's pilots went through his mind. Sarah was obviously alive. Who'd you lose?
Chang.
Chang. Alyssa. Talby wanted to wipe at his eyes. He'd known Chang, had tangled with her a few times in the conjugals, and fought with her multiple times during intra-company training exercises. She'd been a good lover and a great Marine. Sorry to hear it, he said.
Gunny Rice is in the SV tailing Blue, and Corporal Jennings here is my winger.
Jennings. Talby knew the name, but had only met the man maybe once. How long had Jennings been on Trident? 6 months? Talby suddenly realized he'd never even spent the time to get to know the non-coms in Blue or Red Company. In a way, that was better. People's deaths didn't hurt as much when you didn't know them, weren't friends with them, hadn't shared a game of darts, pitchers of beer over poker, or something more intimate. When your shared history amounted to a handshake, a half-forgotten face and voice you couldn't make out of a crowd, mourning them seemed a bit gratuitous, if not dishonest. But he'd known Chang, just as he'd known many of the USN maintenance people and even some of the SFN officers. He'd never see them again. After everything that happened at Mira and Red, he was mostly still in shock when it came to raw emotion. Chang's death, however, hit him hard.
Black tells us you're missing a few too,
Sarah said, interrupting his thoughts. Got that right, Talby said. He'd managed to keep his voice steady, he hoped. Only 2 at Mira, 3 if you count Gunny Cartwright. Long pause.
He's dead?
Talby shook his head. Not the last time I saw him, but he might as well be. Took a blast from the beacon.
Beacon?
Sarah sounded confused.
What's a beacon?
Talby rolled his eyes. Trust me, it'll be easier to explain everything when this shit is over. She sighed.
Then I guess you'll be explaining it to me relatively soon.
Another chill raced down his neck and back. What does that mean?
It means we don't have long before what we flew through gets here. Trust me, it's bad. The things we fought at Uranus followed us, and they're moving much faster than I thought possible.
He nodded. They do that, he said, remembering how the conglomeration of creatures had streaked after the beacon, like guided missiles before they all struck Pluto together and triggered whatever the wave was that Black had showed them.
Dalby?
LeBlanc called over the comms.
We are on approach. Suggest you get what's left of your support vehicle into the hangar and as far back as you can get it. We're bringing in a resupply for Black as well as a new SV for you.
Weapons for Black, sir? He could hear the grin in the captain's voice.
Same kind we have, Lieutenant. The kind that make the bastards explode.
Aye, sir. Making ready. Aye. He used the remaining port thruster to rotate the 52 and head into the hangar.
Talby,
Oakes asked.
you going to park back there?
You know it. Oakes sounded a little concerned.
Watch your ass when you get off of that busted heap. Starfish are still around.
Copy, Talby said. Maneuvering with only 2 thrusters was a pilot's nightmare, and Talby hoped no one was watching this. He brought the SV in at an angle, giving himself as much room as possible to straighten out the craft and keep it from hitting the deck. Wobbling and fighting every meter, the SV's belly only bounced off of the deck twice before he managed to bring it down for good. A grating vibration racked his bones as the atmosteel groaned and complained. Finally, the SV came to a less than graceful halt near the rear of the hangar. He let out a long sigh. That was a horrible job.
You alive?
Oakes asked. Yes, Talby said, his voice clipped.
Good, because I can't wait to show that to the captain and get your flight license revoked.
Fuck you, Talby growled. Oakes laughed into the mic.
Seriously, be careful when you step out.
Thanks for the reminder, he thought of saying, but he only mumbled, copy, and disengaged what was left of the cockpit. The metal vibrated in jerks and stops, obviously warped, the hidden hinges struggling to hold everything together. 1 meter. That's as far as he could get it to move without ejecting the whole damned assembly. Sighing, he grabbed his rifle, maglocked it to his back, and crawled through the half-raised canopy. The ZG made it relatively easy, but he had to use his mag gloves to keep from sliding off the SV entirely. It might have been his imagination, but he thought he heard Oakes chuckling over the comms. Cursing, he gently pushed off the 52's body and hit the deck with his mag boots set to full. His body wavered for a moment before he found his balance. He pulled the rifle from his back, set his suit lights to full, and panned from one corner to the other. Nothing. No shimmers, no shapes hovering near the emergency lights, and no pine cones floating in the air like mines. How many flechettes did he have left in his rifle? 3? 4, maybe? Enough to fend off a few starfish, if they were grouped. Or maybe a close-knit squadron of pine cones. Any more than that, and he'd be down to a vibro blade and nothing else. His sidearm was useless, since normal flechettes merely pissed off the exosolar creatures. He mag-walked carefully away from the broken craft and saw the 2 SV nulls hovering just outside the hangar bay. Sentries, he thought. If something approached, they could blast it before it had a chance to get into the hangar. That made him feel a little better, but he knew that if a horde of the things attacked, it would be virtually impossible for the 2 support vehicles to take them all out. With that in mind, he stopped checking corners and instead focused one of his cam feeds on the hangar opening. If one of the creatures managed to get in here, he wanted to see it coming, and at least have a shot at it before it swooped in to shred him or take him. Or whatever it was the fucking things were doing to humans they captured. Probably eat them, he thought. Then he remembered the feeds from Calimura, Dickerson, and Carbonaro when they were board red. The cockpit, and the nest of those baby starfish, if that's what they were. They had been inside a corpse that was webbed up in the corner. That's how they'd been born? Is that what would happen to him if a starfish yanked him out of the hangar? Fuck that, he whispered, and continued walking, adrenaline vibrating his every nerve. Black, any lively ones in here?
Not that I'm aware of,
the AI said.
As far as I know, the hangar is clear.
As far as you know, he muttered.
While I am reliable, I am not infallible,
she said. The implied indignation in her words made him grin. May be reliable so long as the trio allows you to be, he thought, but didn't say. Oak's voice broke over the comms.
Incoming, Talby. Couple of weird-looking skiffs. Might want to give them some room.
Copy, he said, and hurried his steps. He was heading to the hangar's starboard side when the 2 SV nulls disappeared from the hangar bay entrance. A moment later, a pair of skiffs arrived, each towing a slat of armaments and supplies. What the void?
Just got the inventory list,
Oakes said. Talby's block lit up with the message. He grinned. Black was going to be rearmed with whatever munitions Blue had used to blast her way to the station. But the list didn't stop there. Full complements of suits, nannies, food, and new rifles. Grav-tech ammunition? Talby asked.
No.
Oakes corrected him.
Gravitic.
What the void is that?
No clue,
Oakes said. A third skiff appeared behind the other two, an SV Null locked to its aft. The newcomer hovered patiently beyond the hangar bay. Two of the skiffs had 4 Marines and a gunner. The third, the one towing his SV, was a Marine shy. The first 2 skiffs landed as near to Black as they could get. Black's cargo bay hatch opened. One of the Marines walked from the skiff to Talby.
Permission to board her, sir.
He stopped himself before protesting that he wasn't the captain of the ship. That wasn't true right now, was it? Permission granted. The Marines saluted before turning and heading back to the skiffs. Who had that been? Their corporal, maybe? He cursed himself again for not knowing the enlisted better. While 2 of the Marines stood sentry, one facing the hangar's interior and one covering the hangar entrance, the other Marines piled out of the skiffs, disconnected the slats, and pulled the first into S&R Black.
Hey, Talby, how long you figure this is going to take? We have to get Black refueled, too.
Good point, he said. Captain LeBlanc?
Oui, go ahead.
We need to refuel Black.
No, Lieutenant. Give us a few minutes.
Understood, sir. Well, at least she hadn't bitten his head off.
Lieutenant,
Black said.
Blue knows our requirements.
Should have figured that. It took the Marines little time to stow the first slat. Once they pulled the second slat into the cargo bay, the skiffs moved out of the way and the third skiff pushed its new support vehicle into the hangar bay. Once past S&R Black, the skiff slowly lowered to the deck, the support craft's struts springing slightly.
Your new ride is here,
Sarah said over the comms. He looked it over and whistled. It had more cannons, more missile racks, and the engines didn't resemble anything he'd ever seen. From a distance, however, it wasn't too different from the old reliable SV-52, except for the damned wings, if that's what they were. Same controls? He asked.
More or less. Just be gentle with the throttle and maneuvering. It could pull enough G's to knock you senseless. Now get in that thing. I need you on patrol.
He hesitated for a moment before saying, Copy. He connected to Oakes. I'm heading out with the other SVs.
I figured,
Oakes said.
I'll just sit here in the barn while they give me the VIP treatment.
Talby stared at S&R Black. It felt as though he was saying goodbye to the ship that had brought them to Mira and back, that made sure they'd been safe when the beacon melted Pluto into gas. Black, Oakes, good hunting.
Good hunting, Lieutenant,
Black said. He magwalked to the SV Null and stepped into the cockpit. The moment he buckled in and the hatch closed, he stared in wonder at the controls. The vehicle had no block interface, but it did have an interface to his suit. He activated the control panel, and his visor lit up with options. Optic controlled, he nodded to himself. No block, so no thought transmission. The interface was human-controlled by the movement of his retinas. That meant no AI like Black could control the craft via overrides. She might not even be able to connect to it. Good and bad, thought Talby. New gear, no training, and no clue what was about to happen. Not the best time to learn by the seat of your suit. The holo displays fired up and the screen quickly walked him through the controls. When the short tutorial was finished, a wide smile broke across his face. Now we have a chance.